Hi and welcome to Blue Pigment Podcast. This podcast is to help highlight the individuals that express themselves through creativity. I'm talking about audio forms of art such as poetry, music, singing, comedy, or even storytelling. The podcast usually follows a format where I introduce you to an artist and their creative way of expressing themselves. We then move on to a few adverts which you may want to pay attention to because there could be a discount code in it for you. From there, the majority of the podcast is a discussion with a guest on a form of art and the way in which they express themselves through that creativity. I hope you enjoy the podcast. If you do, please like, share and subscribe. Welcome back to Blue Pigment Podcast. I want to give a pre-warning for this episode as it contains graphic explanations of domestic abuse. And anyone that suffers or had suffered from domestic abuse may be triggered by this episode. These graphic explanations will be starting soon with my first poem by Alexis Casiday, and the poem is called "She Should Have Slit His Throat, but instead she made him sandwiches."
Once upon a time there was a girl, you can call her Havoc, for that is what she lived in. She dwelled in a tornado, a violent, screaming, possessive, demonic, glass-shattering tornado with no end in sight. This is where she learned to survive. Her jaw is still clenched, though the storm is over. "Clean up that fucking mess," the monster would scream over her battered and bleeding body, and she would gather up all her strength and get the broom and dustpan. On one occasion he had gone into a rage and threw all of her figurines against the wall. They were the only connections she had to her life before him. Connection severed, all her belongings destroyed. When there was no more glass to break, he smashed her face, then forced her to walk over the broken glass in bare feet to retrieve cleaning equipment. She cleaned up the porcelain shards and dust with bleeding feet, trying not to care about her lost possessions. He smoked a bowl and watched her. And this was not even the worst day she had endured in the last 2 years. Sometimes, when he gave her a concussion, which happened often, she would lie on the floor, overcome with the sudden urge to fall asleep, praying she would not wake up again. He was too cruel to allow her to die with a peaceful concussion. He forced her to stay awake every time. He gave her another brain injury. He loved to beat her in the face and head. Then he would apologize, blame his schizophrenia, and fuck her while telling her that she was worthless and about the much better lays he had had that week. Then he would come, never quickly enough, and fall asleep. She was afraid to move in bed lest she wake him up, and the tornado would start again. She was not allowed to get out of bed before him. She had to lie silently staring at the ceiling for hours sometimes, until he decided to get out of bed that day. She should have slit his throat, but instead she made him sandwiches. Whenever he caught her reading a book, he would tear it out of her hands and rip it up in front of her. He would rip up her poetry and artwork and tell her how untalented and stupid she was. He allowed her no escape, not even in her own imagination. She was allowed drugs, however, and this made an excellent escape. One night they had been strung out on Adderall for 3 days, and the police began pounding on the door. Havoc's mother had sent them to rescue her. The monster forced her to hide in the bathtub for hours, even after the pounding stopped. He was paranoid that they were staking out the apartment. When she was allowed to come out of the bathtub, he warned her not to make a fucking sound. She knocked over a chair, causing a loud crash. Of course, the cops were long gone. They had better things to do than rescue a 19-year-old drug addict from her hell. The monster pushed her to her knees in front of him and began to rain blow after blow to each of her eyes. He cocked back his arms as far as they would go and punched her over and over again, left, right, aleo. If she began to fall over, he would force her back to her knees. This continued until she was knocked unconscious. She woke up the next day on the kitchen floor, surrounded by broken glass once again, and unable to open her eyes. He smoked a bowl and watched her. "I guess you're up. Now go make me a sandwich."
Hello everyone, you're listening to Blue Pigment Podcast. If you want to become a patron of this show, please go to patreon.com/bluepigment. You will be helping me help the talent that I find along the way. Not only that, the podcast is an advocate for mental health and the positive message in which we want to send about mental health. So if you are a bit about that and you want to jump on board, then please become a patron at patreon.com/bluepigment. Blue Pigment Podcast is sponsored by Huscarl. Go to huscarl.co.uk and use the discount code BLUEPIGMENT for 15% off. Get yourself some t-shirts, stickers, baseball caps, hoodies, printouts, and many more products from Huscarl. Blue Pigment Podcast, sponsored by Huscarl. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Blue Pigment Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Alexis Casiday. She is a poet and hopefully wants to become an author of a poetry book, which she's currently working on with a range of poets from the US to the UK and hopefully some other nations as well. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, an advocate for domestic abuse survivors. So, Alexis, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
So talk to us about your life. I know that you used to be part of the US Navy.
So I was stateside for my whole enlistment, and I was Greenside Navy. So that means that I was stationed with the Marine Corps. My brother was an infantry Marine, and so I wanted to join the military and be stationed near him. He deployed to Iraq 2 times, and I was actually stationed on his base so that I could be there when he deployed and when he came back both times. So he was actually on his first deployment to Iraq when I was in boot camp, and he was sending me letters to encourage me.
That's nice. It's good that you had that support to go through training. You know, training's never easy. They push you to your limits. Is that something that you've carried on with your life, like keep pushing yourself?
Yeah, so I just love to be a student, and so when I find something that I'm passionate about, I'm just all in. So I actually have overcome alcohol and drug addiction, and I found exercise and jiu-jitsu is the thing that helped me to overcome those things and to be able to stay sober and kind of deal with my post-traumatic stress in a healthy way. So I've been clean and sober for 10 years. I actually went to rehab after the Navy and went through I also went through military sexual trauma in the Navy. And so I had pretty bad post-traumatic stress when I got out and went back to drugs and alcohol. I had sort of joined the military trying to get away from my drug addiction and the domestic abuse. And so the Navy helped me with that. But then after my military sexual trauma, I went back to my addiction. And so I was homeless for a while and addicted again. And finally went to rehab after 6 months of being homeless. And once I got clean and sober, I did not know about post-traumatic stress other than being from a war zone. So I had never been to combat, so I didn't realize that I had post-traumatic stress. And what happens on the jiu-jitsu mats for me is that when we're practicing, anxiety comes up and kind of memories will come back that I have hidden or haven't dealt with, and then I'll go home and write about it. So I have a poem about my anxiety attacks on the jiu-jitsu mats. And so the thing, like jiu-jitsu is very healing for post-traumatic stress, and that's the book that I'm making now is raising money to give jiu-jitsu scholarships to combat disabled vets. And I fully believe in the power of jiu-jitsu and the healing that can come from being in that community, from the power of touch, from being in a family that cares about you. And but it does bring up things for me when you're being manhandled and choked. And mostly I've been able to learn how to fight my own anxiety, which I have overcome a lot of my PTSD symptoms, but anxiety has been one that has not gone away. And I have OCD, so obsessive thoughts are something that I really have to fight every day. And so jiu-jitsu gives me a way to practice being mindful, because if if I'm focusing on a OCD thought, I'm not in the moment and I'm going to get choked out. So it's helping me with all kinds of things. And then when it does bring something up that's not a pleasant memory, I just go and write about it. And then so it's kind of like a whole healing process for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I suppose the thing with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is it's a community. It's looking after your physical health, as in its actual physical work. And you have to stay focused, because if you don't stay focused, then the other person's going to get the better of you. And like you said about, the memories that might pop up, the bad memories, even when they pop up, you've got another mechanism, which is to write it down and to express yourself and to get those thoughts and feelings that are in your head and put them out, outside of your head and onto paper. And I know I've listened to your poem, and if you don't mind, I'd love to put that poem at the beginning of this episode, the one that you sent to me recently. It kind of helps develop the story of what we're talking about here. And when I first listened to that poem, I was like, this is hard to listen to. This is deep. And it's, there's absolutely no surprise whatsoever that if somebody was to go through that, they wouldn't have, they would have PTSD, because and when I say domestic abuse survivor, that's what you are. You're a survivor, and not only a survivor, now you're a thriver, because you're encouraging other people to do what you've done. You're encouraging other people to wear their hearts on a sleeve and talk about PTSD, to talk about domestic abuse, because the more we talk about these things, the more normalized it is to talk about it, and the more normal it is to stand against it and to stick up and to be there for each other. So yeah, your community spirit is not just in, on social media. It's across the world. It's in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that community. It's on the internet, and that community. It's in poetry community. So you're doing a fantastic thing with bringing all these people together. Well done.
Thank you very much.
At the end of your Instagram, you've got it says your cool project / cat lady.
Oh yes, my cat is up here sleeping.
Okay.
That's Vandal Savage.
Okay. I in my head I was like, cat lady, what, like from Batman? That's what I envisioned, cat lady from Batman. So I'd like to focus on the domestic abuse stuff, because I think that'd be more beneficial. The PTSD that you probably would have acquired from domestic abuse, and your journey through that. If you're happy to talk about it, I know in England and Wales there are 2.3 million adults between the ages of 16 and 74 that suffer from, or that have experienced domestic abuse. And the percentage of those that actually gets taken seriously by the police and are brought to justice is such a small percentage, because for whatever reason, people not speaking up, people afraid to speak up, people speaking up but not being taken seriously. What was your journey like through that terrible time?
I found that people don't like to look at things that make them uncomfortable. In real life, we like to watch it on TV and think that it's make-believe, but when I was in that situation, a lot of people would see me with giant black eyes, almost swollen shut, and they would just walk past as if it was nothing. And I think that it made them too uncomfortable. They didn't know what to do about it, so they did nothing. And I know that the police often have their hands tied, because we as women won't come forward to press charges against the men that we think we love. They sort of brainwash you that the police are bad. Don't get me in trouble. You can't say anything, because what am I going to do if I go to jail and it'll be all your fault? And we believe those things. And so I remember we got pulled over one time by the police, and I had a black eye, and the cop took me out of the car and said, what happened to your eye? You can tell me. But I was so scared, even away from the car, And I had been so ingrained that the police were bad and that he loved me that I just said, this is none of your business, pig. So I just got back in the car and he couldn't do anything. He knew that I was being abused, but I wouldn't tell on the person. So there's that piece that you have to overcome. Both of my parents tried to save me from the situation, and I sent them both away and told them they needed to mind their own business and that nothing was going on, that they were crazy. And there's really, when you love somebody that's in this situation, your hands are tied sometimes. You can't just go and kidnap them. If they're over 18, the police can't do anything. And so the thing that helped me to work towards escaping, I was 16 when I fell in love with this person, and I was almost 21 years old when I left him. But over the years, many people reached out to me and showed kindness to me, and they just said something. Hey, this isn't right what you're going through. Are you covering bruises with that sweater? Just having people speak the truth into your life makes a difference, and it adds up. And my grandmother would send me cards in the mail. I wasn't allowed to speak with my family, but my grandmother would send a card every month, and it had a scripture verse on it, and it would just say, I'm praying for you and I love you. I wish you would call. And I would just read them and throw them away. But now that I look back on it, I see those as these little candles were being lit to show, I guess, to open up my world and open up my darkness. And so saying something, even if the person doesn't get out of the situation, calling the police as many times as you have to, even if they deny it and nothing comes of that, those things do make a difference, more than averting your eyes and just walking past.
That's a great message to send. Like if you see something that looks out of place, raise it. I'm not talking about the person that's in the situation. I'm talking about the person that might view the situation. And if you don't first succeed with the police, you have to be persistent and continue. You have to get under their skin. You have to annoy them until the point where they're like, all right, we're just going to have to do something about this. And then that's hopefully when, interdiction will happen and that will stop. But so you say, sometimes the police's hands are tied, especially when the person being abused has been brainwashed into thinking that bad things are going to happen if I don't, especially when drugs and alcohol are involved. You're not thinking straight, and somebody's doing the thinking for you, I guess, and it's not what's best for you, it's what they want out of that situation. So that's an awful thing for you to have gone through. What was the turning moment that was like, I need to get out of here, and how did you do it?
One of the messages I got from my grandmother was that my brother was graduating Marine Corps boot camp, and I hadn't seen my brother since I was 16. I hadn't seen any of my family, and my brother is 1 year younger than me. And I had missed his high school graduation because the monster wouldn't let me go visit my family. But when he was graduating Marine Corps boot camp, something in my brain, I didn't know much about the military, but 9/11 had happened pretty recently before this. And that really opened my eyes to, there are bigger things happening in the world than just my little life, with this abuse that I'm facing, just me and this person. So that kind of awoke my eyes to bigger things happening in the world, but I still didn't do anything about it until it was somebody that I cared about going to war. So I found out that my brother was graduating Marine Corps boot camp, and so I asked the monster, can I go to California to see my brother graduate Marine Corps boot camp? And sometimes he would be, if I got him stoned enough, so if we had enough marijuana and I could just keep him very, very high, his temper would be better and he would be more pliable, I guess. So I prayed for a lot of marijuana because we were dry at that time. We couldn't find anything. We were living in Wisconsin, and it was still very, very illegal everywhere to be smoking pot. So you couldn't always find anything to smoke. And so I prayed, please, I want to go to this Marine Corps boot camp. And I wasn't religious, but there was nobody else I had to talk to except God. And I was hoping that he was listening. I wasn't sure. But he said, please let me have enough marijuana to get me to my brother's graduation. And so we got a pound of weed after that. And then, so I just kept getting him high. And after he was really, really high, I said, hey, can I please go to this graduation? It's really important to me. And he actually said yes. And that was the first time he'd let me go anywhere by myself without him. And so I got a plane ticket and flew to California to San Diego to see my brother graduate boot camp. And I was probably about 90 pounds. I'd been addicted to drugs for several years and being abused for several years, but I think that I hid it really well. My family didn't know what I'd been going through when I saw them at that graduation, and just seeing my brother graduate as a Marine woke something in my heart, and I just couldn't be in that prison anymore. And so when I left that graduation, I got back home to Wisconsin, and I said, I still had my little suitcase packed, and I said, I still wasn't thinking about leaving him. I still loved him and I wanted it to work, but I told him, I don't want you to hit me anymore. If you ever hit me again, I'm leaving. And he said, oh no, I would never. Of course, I love you. And so the next morning I woke up and sat up in bed, and he just woke up and punched me in the face and knocked me out of the bed. And so I grabbed my little suitcase and I ran to the door, and he started chasing me and tried to close the door before me, but I got out, and I had a friend that, one of those people that just were lighting candles for me along the way. She lived down the road, and she had told me, if you ever need help, I know you're being abused, and I wouldn't admit it to her, but she knew the signs. She said, here's my address and just come anytime. And so she happened to be just 2 blocks away. And so I ran with my little suitcase to her house, and he was driving after me, trying to hit me. And I made it to her house, and I pounded on the door, and he was outside screaming for me to come out. And she let me call my dad. And so my dad was in Missouri. And I said, Dad, it's not working out here. Can I please come and live with you? And he told me yes, but I said, well, I don't want to leave now because it's almost Christmas. So send me a ticket and I'll come after Christmas. I'll move in with you, and I'm going to leave him after Christmas. And something still wasn't allowing me to go. So I just made an excuse that I need to stay through Christmas. It's not a good time to leave someone. And so my dad sent me a bus ticket, and he sent it. I think he sent a 2-way bus ticket. So he was pretty smart, because I needed him to think that I was coming back, or he wouldn't have let me go. And so I kept him really high for those 2 weeks. And the morning of that my bus was leaving came, and I told him, hey, I came back from California. I'm going to come back from this trip too. I just want to go see my dad. And so he was driving me to the bus stop, and it was the middle of winter in Wisconsin. So there was snow everywhere, and it was very cold and dark. And he said that the voices in his head were telling him to crash the car into a wall and kill me so that I couldn't leave him. And I just said, but I promise I'm coming back. See, my ticket is 2 ways. And he believed me, and he said, fine, I guess I'll let you go. And so we pulled into the bus stop, and I just remember that this fear that was filled my body like concrete, and I couldn't move, and I couldn't get out of the car, and I didn't think that I could live without him, because he had told me, you're worthless, you're stupid, nobody else will ever want you. You're lucky to have me. You deserve all of this. And that's what I still believed. But I had to get to my brother. And my brother became more important to me than what the monster was saying about me. And so I just said a little prayer in my head. God, please, if you're there and if you want me to leave him, I need you to take away this fear. And I felt this light come from the top of my head to melt all the way down to my toes, and it made me warm inside, and it lit up my whole body, and the fear was gone, and I was able to get out of the car. And I had been cemented to that car seat. I couldn't move. And so I got out and I said goodbye to him, and I got on the bus, and then I rode to Missouri. I was very scared. I had no voice. I hadn't even been allowed to make eye contact with a man. So one time I was giving money for gas at a gas station, and he was watching me from the gas pumps, and my fingers accidentally touched the man's hand as he was giving me change. So I slid the money across the counter so that I wouldn't touch him, and I was looking at the counter so that I wouldn't be accused of flirting, and the man's fingertips touched me, and then I got beat up in the car for flirting. And so he would throw food on me, soda, beat me in the car, and force me to walk behind him. He wouldn't let me wash the food out of my hair, make me go in public like that. And so I was just very scared, and I was just like a rag doll walking around. So I made it to Missouri, where my dad was, and then I was probably there for a few months, and I found out that my brother was going to Iraq for the first time, and so I went to Chicago to my mother's house to visit him while he was on leave before he was going there. And when he went back to California to deploy, I just said, I can't let him go to Iraq by himself, so I went to the recruiter's office the next day and joined the Navy. And then 2 weeks later, July 7th, 2004 was my 21st birthday. Then I was in boot camp.
That's thank you very much for sharing that story. That is something. That is a story that is an awful thing for you to go through. And, you're not alone in that regards. And there's plenty, there's far too many people that have gone through a similar thing. And with you sharing your story, I think that's such a brave thing to do. Not only the act of escaping this monster, the bravery of, telling the story, and the bravery of continuously telling the story, and through poetry and through wearing your heart on your sleeve, you're doing, domestic abuse survivors, or to people that are going through domestic abuse, you're doing them a service by being a vocal ambassador of somebody that's been through it, and somebody who's experienced it, and somebody who you can relate. And hopefully, after this podcast goes out, I hope, if it helps one person escape a situation that they don't deserve to be in, because nobody deserves that. Nobody deserves to be treated the way that you were. And if it can help one person, then we've both, and because of you could have saved somebody's life. And you probably already have saved somebody's life. Through the stories you're telling, through the poetry, you've probably saved somebody's life. Thank you.
Hope so. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
No, oh man, that was deep. That was very deep, and I really feel for you, but I also feel for your family that knew what you was going through, and the candle lighters that you said, the people that were trying to show you the way, that may have felt out of power because of the whole situation, and it eventually love prevailed, and by the sounds of it, it was the love for your brother that it took you to make the call. Like, I've got to make this call now. I've got to make the decision to go and do whatever I can do to escape the situation.
Yes.
Jeez.
That's the other side of the coin for my book project. It's your call. So many people tried to reach out to me, but I had to eventually make that call and follow through with the plan. I had to make the decision on my own. Nobody could come and get me out of it. Many people tried. And so it is your call, it's your responsibility. It's not your fault what you're going through, but it's your responsibility to get out. And I used lies, I used trickery, I used marijuana, I used a two-way bus ticket when I was only going one way. Whatever I had to do to get out of there, I
Survival.
did. Yes.
Survival, that's what it is. You did what you had to do to survive.
Yes.
And, you know, there are other things that you could have done to survive that would probably have wound you up in jail. And, you know, you did what you had to do to you know, to stop that happening and to, you know, to escape as well. So yeah, I always think, like, if somebody's being like that kind of person, that kind of, you know, the man that was doing that to you, I say man, but there's nothing manly within a person that does something like that. It's cowardice and it's wrong, and it's completely, you know, to give them a term of man is just, you know, it's not a good thing. You know, they're not a man. You know, to think that that's something that a man does is completely wrong. Is there anything that you know about of his history that led him to be that kind of monster?
Yes, there are no excuses, but he had a lot of them. But his father was violent against his mother, so he watched his father beat his mother his whole life. He had schizophrenia. He had many different drug addictions, but he also had was offered therapy. He was offered medicine. He was offered a lot of things to help him get his mind back on track, and that's one reason that I stayed so long with him, because he was a brilliant artist, and I fell for that creative side of him. And I saw that with the right medication, with the right help, he could be a functional person in society, and he didn't have to be this violent person, because he wouldn't only beat me, he would beat himself. He would beat his head against a wall. He would rip off his clothes. He would rip out his hair. When the schizophrenia was overtaking him, so he would normally beat himself pretty badly, and then he would beat me until I was unconscious. And so he was pretty mentally ill. But there's a lot of people with mental illnesses that don't cause anyone harm, and they take responsibility for it. So I don't see that as a valid excuse.
No, there is no excuse whatsoever for that sort of behavior. It's like you said, there are services out there, especially in, you know, Western society. There are services out there that if you have an issue, you can get it sorted, and it doesn't need to mean that you take it out on somebody.
Yes.
Yeah, like what you've done is very brave, very, very brave, and hopefully you give justification for other people to be that brave and to take a step away from that environment. When it comes to the poetry then, and putting your experiences down onto paper. In fact, before I go on with that, are you okay with what you've shared?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll just I know you said, you know, before we start recording, you wear your heart on your sleeve. You said how it is. You feel that, I suppose, the expressing the messages is helpful, not just to you but to others. But yeah, so through the poetry and the message you express through that, do you have any particular poetry that you'd like to read out today, or that you'd like me to feature on the podcast?
Sure. I have one that I wrote recently, kind of about my healing journey. But I really believe that one of the mottos I live by is our secrets keep us sick. And so, especially with children that are abused, the things that the adults tell them and domestic abusers tell us is that you can't tell anyone this. And so their power is in us not speaking. And that includes sexual abuse. All of this abuse, victims are afraid to speak up, and they feel shame. And so there's nothing that I'm afraid to talk about. And I think that has given me great power over these people that have hurt me. When I was silent, that's when my depression was the worst. That's when I was suicidal all the time. And when I began to speak about it, I took my power back. There's nothing that they can do to me that I'm ashamed to talk about. So I think our secrets keep us sick, and that we need to start telling our secrets to each other and in non-judgmental environments. And so that it's okay to have mental illness. It's okay to be traumatized. It's okay to have had these horrible things happen to you, and it's okay to talk about them, and to have a community of people that are going to listen, because all of us have something that we are ashamed to talk about. And I think that that's why the bad people seem to be winning, because we are not talking about what they're doing. And so when we speak about what they've done to us, they grow less powerful, and they are seen for the cowards that they are. And then I think that makes them scared. And so, and the other, learning jiu-jitsu for victims is very important, because the police can't always be there for you to save you. Your father, your whoever you're depending on to save you in that moment that you need it, they're not always going to be there. And so we need victims to be scary, and they need to be scared of us. And to think twice before they attack us or try to hit us. I recently tried dating again about 6 months ago. I've been single for 5 years. I have no desire to have a boyfriend or date anyone at this time, but I decided to just get myself out there and try it again, because our society is very adamant about, I'm 38, and so it's not normal to have never been married and not have kids. And so I felt that pressure from society that I'm not doing things the normal way. And so I decided to start dating again, and I met a man who began to show those signs of being an abuser within the first month I was with him. And my jiu-jitsu community helped me to see that right away, and the confidence that I have now. I just got rid of him so fast, and I wouldn't have been able to do that a few years ago before jiu-jitsu. And so I recommend it for any woman, any child that's gone through those things.
That's a brilliant message. Fantastic. Empowering women is what you're doing. So that's a cool, great message. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a good community to be involved in. So you got a poem lined up for us now?
I went on a soapbox. So this poem is called Sleeping Beauty's Castle. A callus has closed over the hole of creativity inside me. There is a deep well of stories which are churning and reaching up through the darkness to make their way out of the cold. The well where my stories are trapped lies deep within my heart and is encased by bricks and sandbags, brambles and brush. For darkness always leaves behind seeds, and the weeds that grow therefrom are harder to forage through than the spell surrounding Sleeping Beauty's castle. This churning was needing to break into my own scarred fortress, to let in air, light, and hope. This is the source of all my anxiety. I want to be seen, but I am scared to see myself. The self that went to sleep to hide from the endless years of beatings, angry words, and flying fists that penetrated deep, but not deep enough to wake the princess. At the bottom of the well, I built her. I just let her slumber and build thicker walls to keep from disturbing her peace. Now I feel she has been awakened, now that we are safe. There are no fists, no screams, no breaking glass. It is safe for her to emerge, and I want to tell her our story. But how do I get through the damn forest I grew to protect her? It has been said that the pen is mightier than the sword, and I must believe that is the tool for the job. I will tell my stories and clear away the brush with each telling. And with the final telling, I will reach her and offer her a crown jeweled with dignity and pearls. And I will apologize for the dents and tarnish that happened along the journey to reach her. The anxiety will cease. Out of the well will grow an oak of elaborate strength. It awakened with the princess. In its shade she will find solace. From its leaves she will heal the wounded around her. From its roots she will find courage to stay awake and to face the future. And she will thank me for protecting her all this time. She will don the crown and dissipate into a million little pieces, and everywhere she lands will grow an oak, whose shade will provide peace so other princesses can come out of hiding and rule as queens.
That is amazing. Well done. Like you could tell from the poetry, it kind of starts off that it's like enclosed and imprisoned and entrapped, and there's all these things that have been built around to defend, that person or that place, and then breaking those down and coming out of your shell. And then the way I saw that about planting the new trees is like the new, spreading that message like we're doing now, to hope that these other people will shoot up from there and spread that message too. Yeah, it's a really good, and the way in which you're doing it using the sort of princess story is very artistic, very creative. Good work. So whereabouts is the best place for people to find your work?
So I have my poetry is on TikTok. My art, I'm working on collecting that to put it on. It's on my Instagram, but it's sort of sporadic. I've been sort of creating all of this poetry and artwork over the last few years, and I haven't really shared it yet. So I guess just follow me on social media and I'll put it on there at some point.
What's your for Instagram and TikTok?
My Instagram is Harley Jiu-Jitsu, and my TikTok, I think it's also Harley Jiu-Jitsu.
So I could put the links to whatever you'd like me to put the links into for this episode. I just want to just make a point for anyone that's listening that may have been, has a similar effect or similar situation that Alexis has been in. There are a number of different websites. I mentioned two now, but if you was to Google it, you'd find a lot more. Refuge.org.uk is one website, and nationaldahelpline.org.uk. DA being obviously domestic abuse, nationaldahelpline.org.uk. Thank you very much for coming on today, Alexis. I've really appreciated you sharing not only the story and the poetry and your experiences and what you've done to better yourself and what you're doing to help other people as well. Anything else you want to add before call it a day?
I would just like to say thank you for listening to my story, and just keep lighting candles for people. Just be kind to them and love them, and you might be one of the people that helps them escape, even if you never know. So most of the people that helped me along my journey of healing and escape and survival, I would never be able to tell them that they helped me. So the things that you're doing today, you might not see the fruit of it, but they do matter. And I remember all those people that lit candles for me along my darkness, and I wouldn't be alive today without them. So I try always to be kind to people, to love them the best that I can, and to light candles even if I don't see the results.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your you coming on, and I'll put all the links to your social media on the episode. Thanks a lot,
thank
Alexis.
You so much.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. The opinions or views expressed on this podcast are solely of my own or the guests, and do not represent the opinions or views of anybody else or the Ministry of Defence.
Shish kebab, Shawshank Redemption, Chicago! You're out of there!